What is going on, GBA? I am the Confusion, and welcome back to week 5 of the weekly recap, though, as you all know, I am not alone. I'm here with the amazing Xilicks.
So, GBA fans, it's Xilicks here.
And this week we have a whole new batch of 8 fantastic games to go through, so let's absolutely jump right in. The first matchup we're going to take a look at, probably one of the longer ones I know, is the Philadelphia Scissors up against the Milwaukee Bewares. Chimp Act bringing Tapu Bulu, Nihilego, Victini, Uxie, the newly picked up Ferrothorn, and the newly picked up Slurpuff. Milwaukee Bewares and Wolfie bringing that Xurkitree, his Mega Garchomp, the Masquerain for I think is the first time, the Florges, Bronzong, and Jellicent core he's known for bringing. So this is obviously one of the longer games, so let's just go through the main points of this game that really turns the tides throughout the battle. First up is turn 1, right? We have the webs go up on both the Slurpuff and the Masquerain, so you know this is going to be a game of webs. Now, a few things come out of this. First up is because the Bronzong comes in right after to set up a Reflect, because it is slowed down by that sticky webs, you already know it's heat proof, right? Bronzong has one of those two abilities, heat proof being one of them. Because it was not levitating and it did get affected by the sticky webs, it was an automatic heat proof, made sense for that Victini. But just to pretty much sum up what majority of this game is going to look like, it's 30% clicking Protect, 20% clicking Wish, 49% setting up hazards, and 1% actual damage. That's just kind of how I split it up. You can decide differently, but that's how majority of this match goes, and it gets pretty stally at times. So I'll explain some of those plays and why it was so stally. First up being that Ferrothorn. Chimp made some pretty good plays with the Ferrothorn, first spiking up, and then as the Jellicent came in to taunt, he clicked Protect. After seeing the Protect, he ended up going for the Leech Seed on the Will-O-Wisp, probably predicting the fact that Wolfie would not go for a taunt again, trying to catch maybe that Tapu Bulu on the taunt. Wolfie tries to go for that Will-O-Wisp, misses as Ferrothorn gets up those Leech Seeds, then he clicks Knock Off on the obvious taunt. So just a good set of plays on that Ferrothorn with Chimp. Wanted to point that out. Although the Leech Seed and the knockoff do bring that Jellicent down to about half, it is able to recover off later as the Uxie switches in. The next big point is the Draco missing on the Mega Garchomp. As it takes that Glaciate, it does not die, but the Draco Meteor incoming to that Victini misses. Now that would have been a lot of good damage, especially because rocks kept going back up on the field, and that could have pressured Chimp a little bit more, but he is able to save a lot of damage on that Victini. The next big thing I want to talk about is the constant back and forth between Florges and Uxie. Uxie is able to naturally heal up through leftovers and set up stealth rocks, as the Florges is able to defog. So not only does it have to defog the webs and the spikes, but now it's in a battle between Uxie by clicking Psychic, Moonblast, Wish, Protect, defog, all while Uxie's getting some leftover recovery, and it's just a lot of PP stalling, which is why 20 minutes in, no Pokemon have gone down. Chimp sees this is going to be a losing battle and switches into the Slurpuff to stall a little bit better thanks to the Wish Protect and the fact that he can pressure defog with Sticky Web. Good bringing on his end. After that though, we do see a double switch out. One, Wolfie switches out into the Chomp. After that, Glaciate is able to wish up back to about full as Chimp switches into that Victini. Now, after this, Chimp is able to bait in that Florges with the Uxie's U-turn and is able to kill the Florges with a V-Create. Wolfie did Protect, predicted a switch out, but that banded V-Create did a ton of damage and absolutely neutered that Florges, so just a solid bring on his end. Then we see the Hazards game. Uxie get up rocks, Bugabuzz kills the Uxie, and adds webs to the field. Spikes go up, all while you have to remember the defogger just went down. So the webs go back up, spikes go back up from Ferrothorn, Bronzong gets rocks up, Ferrothorn gets another layer of spikes up, all while really no damage is going on, which is kind of crazy. A Continental Crush does finally come out on the Nihilego, trying to break that Jellicent, but just doesn't do enough, and the ability to click Recover, along with Cursed Body, allows it to stall out things like the Nihilego, because Power Gem is eventually neutered out thanks to that Cursed Body, and the same goes with the Tapu Bulu. Because it did end up burning, Nihilego makes an grazing... the Jellicent and Wolfie make an amazing play by clicking Will-O-Wisp on the incoming Tapu Bulu. We'll see that actually doesn't make a big difference, but hold up. The fact that he burns the Bulu really does help him out because Cursed Body Jellicent is able to pretty much wall in Xiliggo and eventually take on the Tapu Bulu thanks to Cursed Body and recover. However, once Bronzong goes down to the Snarl plus all those entry hazards, seeing Heatproof not work out, if only he had brought the Levitate, those spikes would not be doing as much damage, or really any damage. He would be taking Stealth Rocks though, that wouldn't be as big of a deal, because it wouldn't have went down to the Snarl. After that, pretty much the end game, we have 5 minutes left, a burned Tapu Bulu still wrecked Wolfie's endgame team. The Zong went down to the Snarl, the Jellicent went down to the Woodhammer, the Hornleech, the Chomp ended up going down, and the Xurkitree, all to a burned Tapu Bulu. So I think Chimp really did play this game well. He was in a tough spot against a lot of his bulk, but the way he played it out with all those hazards and clicking Wish and Protect. Long game, but a very well played game on Chimp's end, and I still think Wolfie did make as great plays, but I think he fell down to the way Chimp was playing. What do you think? It was a long game.
Yeah, so Chimp is a very, I guess, careful, well thought out battler. He really thinks about, what's going to happen in the end game, how am I going to prep myself for the end game. And then Wolfie, on the other hand, is also kind of a slow battler. He likes to take his time in between turns. He prefers a more stally playstyle. So seeing these two coaches go off against one another was very interesting, especially because they both had quite a bit of hazards going on with sticky webs, rocks, spikes. And, once the defoggers go down and then once Chimp is able to get his hazards back up again, it's kind of going to seal the deal because, as you mentioned, even though the Tapu Bulu was burned, it was able to do so much work because everything has to switch on the hazards and take all that damage. And obviously the Bulu has quite a bit of recovery with things like the grassy terrain and whatnot. So yeah, very long battle. Let's move on to the next battle, a little bit of a faster one between Lars and Joey. They both, played the game pretty well, but it ended up going very quickly because of that. So let's look at the rosters. We have the Rhydon, Whimsicott, Salazzle, Necrozma, Mega Gyarados, and Zygarde 50% from the Bronx Beartics, while the Brusha Donphan brought the Tapu Fini, Kyurem Black, Crocodile, Lurantis, Gengar, and Mega Manectric. So starting off the battle, they both decide to get up their Stealth Rocks with the Crocodile and Rhydon, and then we see pivoting on both sides, and both teams, they're starting to read what their immediate switch-ins to each mons are. So Joey decides to make the first play, bringing in his Rhydon on Gengar's Shadow Ball, and then doubling into the Salazzle as Lars brings in his Lurantis. This will allow for Joey to knock out the Crocodile with 2 overheats. Lars, however, he can bring in his Kyurem Black here to get a revenge kill, as Joey sends out his Gyarados to avoid the Earth Power before he Mega Evolves, but then he's going to Mega Evolve to take less damage from a Fusion Bolt and get off a Dragon Dance. The Fusion Bolt does come out, but obviously since he Mega Evolved, it's not going to be Quadra effective, and he's going to take it relatively well. He is going to get off an Earthquake before going down to the second Fusion Bolt, but the damage that he got off with the Gyarados will allow for the Whimsicott to revenge kill with the Moonblast. Lars takes this opportunity to revenge kill with a hidden power, but Joey brings back in his Rhydon, which is able to soak up a few hits and get an Earthquake off on the Mega Manectric. Unfortunately for Joey, won't be enough, and he will lose his Rhydon to the Mega Manectric, but this gives Joey the chance to set up the Tailwind with his Whimsicott, which he does sack the Whimsicott after he gets up that Tailwind, and he brings in his Salazzle. Now Lars is going to attempt to stall out some turns of the Tailwind, so he takes a lot of damage on his Gengar, and then he sacks his Manectric to hazards, and then he also sacks his Tapu Fini to the Salazzle. Lars mentioned in his commentary, though, that he miscounted the Tailwind turns, and he made a mistake by losing Tapu Fini, as there was a chance that he potentially could have won the late game with Lurantis, but it wasn't a secured victory with it wasn't a secured victory with the Lurantis, so he could have had a better chance had he not sacked the Tapu Fini. But regardless, the Fini did go down to the Salazzle, and it is going to clean up the rest of the game, getting the knockout on both the Gengar and Lurantis, and then it goes down to the Life Orb recoil, giving Joey the 2-0 victory.
Yeah, the way this played out was very interesting. Obviously, Joey had a lot of threats, but the way Lars played with his threats was also really interesting to see, because things like Lurantis and things like a scarfed Tapu Fini, which is something you don't see too often, did have the potential, but the way Joey managed to switch around and beat that down while obviously taking a lot of damage ended up working in his favor. Going into the next game, we have the San Diego Chim Chargers up against the Detroit Steel Wings. MV bringing Gligar and Polion, the Alolan Raichu and Tapu Koko, Kyurem and Hoopa Unbound, while Chase is bringing Vullaby, Thundurus Incarnate, Jirachi, Mega Beedrill, Tangela, and Infernape. Now, this game is going to be one of the faster ones for sure, because it ends up coming down to one team just not having enough bulk to really take on the offense of the other, and obviously I'm talking about Chase not being able to really handle that Alolan Raichu, although he did have the Tangela. So let's go into the logistics of what happened in this game. Obviously, as you can see, that Alolan Raichu looked good straight from the matchup. The only Pokemon that did appreciate the specs in the terrain Stab Thunderbolt was Tangela. Thankfully, it was a Spadef set, so it was a pretty good check at that. But once MV managed to whittle that Pokemon down, albeit due to a lot of endeavor, not so much to the damage, because only when you look at MV's team do you realize Kyurem was really the only threat to that Tangela. So that the sub endeavor set did manage to do a lot of damage to that Kyurem, though it ended up biting him in the butt, unfortunately. Turn 1 though, the Mega Beedrill versus the Hoopa Unbound is a crazy turn in my opinion, because Chase spoke about the fact that Hoopa Unbound could be scarfed. He did back up his thought process saying Alolan Raichu and Tapu Koko is already a lot of speed for one team. Would he really bring the scarfed Hoopa Unbound? The fact that he led with it probably meant yes, but he did make that bet that it wasn't. Didn't end up working out for him because that Hyperspace Hole absolutely blew back that Mega Beedrill. Later on though, that Tangela does end up missing a Stun Spore on that Kyurem, which could have been big because you always know how Parahax is, and since Kyurem was one of the biggest ways of damaging the Tangela, I do think that that was very unfortunate on Chase's end, and the way it played out could have changed, because right after Kyurem is able to predict that Jirachi, MV making a great play and clicking Earth Power. The second time he's done this, I believe week 1, he also did this against Aster and the Mega Lopunny, so some pretty good plays over there. Afterwards, Thundy does come in on that Empoleon, forces in the Tapu Koko. Jirachi eats a huge Twinkle Tackle, which was pretty impressive, being that it wasn't that bulky, it was a Scarf set, and is able to get up those rocks. Now, what those rocks enable MV to do is send an Empoleon to Defog, which actually only ends up baiting out that Thundurus Incarnate to get a Defiant boost, something that you don't see too often, but now in this generation with so many Pokemon getting Defog, much more viable with that physical Defiant set. Gets a +2 right off the bat, and a Z-Fly nuked whatever was coming in. In this case, MV decided to sack that Gligar. A crit does get it out in one shot, but regardless, MV did say he was going to leave his Gligar in, so the crit didn't really end up mattering all that much. Afterwards, the Thunderbolt spam on the Tangela really does wear that thing down. Although the Endeavor does bring down that Kyurem, which was great prep on his end, and he played with it very well, it really just forced him to switch out the Tangela, sack the Jirachi, and once Tangela came back in after taking rocks and a Volt Switch, Alolan Raichu came in and spammed Thunderbolt. So as you can see, Alolan Raichu picking up a nice 4 kills. MV played with it perfectly, waited on it perfectly. The fact that Volt Switch on Tapu Koko let it come in at perfect times. U-turn on Gligar also worked out. And unfortunately, Chase just didn't have the bulk to withstand Alolan Raichu. Even though Tangela had a pretty decent matchup, just the way the game played out didn't end up working for him. Maybe if he got that Stun Spore off, it would have been different. But regardless, that's what happened. It's a 4-0 for MV. What do you think of the game, Xilicks?
Yeah, losing the Beedrill pretty early on definitely hurt. I don't know if it would have quite saved his game, because obviously the Raichu is just very powerful once it's, you know, getting its Surge Boost or whatever. So there was that. Seeing the Raichu actually put in work this week, despite it not being able to put in work against Jolt, was also pretty cool to see, because I haven't seen this mon used in League format too much, so it's definitely interesting to see a set like that end up working out. But yeah, I mean, MV just had control with most of the momentum. He was able to get that Defog and Polion meme off. So, you know, it's always a good game when that happens. Yep. But moving on to the next matchup, we have San Francisco Giants gym leader Gio versus Coach Z in the Columbus Chew. The Giants have a roster of Mew, Mega Scizor, Toxapex, Shaman, Haxorus, and the Rabombi, while the Chew brought the Excadrill, Sneasel, Mega Ampharos, Manaphy, Celebi, and Blaziken. This must be the week for quick matches. we have yet another quick match. Starting this one, we see the Celebi and the Rabombi take the lead. Coach Z will get his Celebi out of there, fearing that bug move, but Geo makes a great play of going for the super effective hidden power ground on the incoming Excadrill. Geo then wants to scout the Excadrill set, so he brings in his Toxapex, and the Excadrill is going to go for a Poison Jab, dealing a large chunk of damage to itself with the Life Orb and the Rocky Helmet recoil. Coach Z is going to attempt to take down the Toxapex with an Earthquake, but the Toxapex will barely survive, and the Excadrill doesn't have nearly enough health to take a Scald. So then Coach Z is going to bring in his Blaziken and go for the Earthquake, which this was a pretty big misplay in my opinion, because the Toxapex was on 12 HP, so had he just gone for the Flare Blitz, the Toxapex would have gone down. He said in his commentary that he didn't want to go for the Flare Blitz because he didn't think he would switch in his quad weak Mon, which he did. Gym Leader Geo does bring in the Scizor to take the Earthquake, but he did mention that had the Fire move come out, it wouldn't have been a big deal, so this wasn't really like a stunt or whatever. Like, had his Scizor gone down, it would have been whatever, he would have gone into something else right away. But then the Scizor will take the Earthquake, and then Gym Leader Geo will go back into his Toxapex, predicting the Flare Blitz, so the Blaziken will take a little bit of damage from the recoil and then also the Rocky Helmet. And the Flare Blitz is going to take down the Toxapex, or sorry, the Earthquake on the following turn, plus the Flare Blitz damage will take down that Toxapex, but this allows Gym Leader Geo to bring in the Haxorus and go for the Acid Downpour, because there was no Clefable, so he basically uses the Z-move on it whatever he wants, and that will get rid of the Blaziken. We then see the Manaphy come out from the Columbus Chew, going for the Ice Beam. The Haxorus will survive and set up a Dragon Dance, which will allow him to Outrage, killing the Manaphy, and then getting Revenge Kill by the Sneasel. The Scizor is then going to come out to U-turn as Coach Z brings in the unevolved Ampharos, which will get the static paralysis. This won't end up mattering at all though, as Geo sends in his Rabombi and sets up a Quiver Dance after knocking out the Ampharos with a Moonblast, and he pretty much just wins the game at this point. It's worth mentioning that the Rabombi did not have a bug type attack, so the Celebi could have just attacked and then follow up with either the Sneasel or potentially 2 attacks from the Celebi, and would have been enough to take down the Rabombi, but the Scizor basically had the game won at that point anyways. But Coach Z obviously did not have the foresight of knowing that the Rabombi did not have a bug type attack, so he's going to attempt to Sucker Punch with the Celebi. It's not going to work out. The Rabombi is going to get a crit with the Moonblast, taking down the Celebi, and then the Rabombi is at enough health to survive against the Sneasel, so he's going to be able to take that out as well, giving Gym Leader Geo the 4-0 victory.
The only thing I really want to touch on is something you mentioned, which was that Toxapex versus the Blaziken matchup. I mean, I was baffled by the fact that he went for Earthquake over Flare Blitz. I mean, Flare Blitz was such an easy play with Toxapex so low. Nothing came in. I mean, even the worst case scenario of Haxorus coming in, that thing takes 90 damage from Flare Blitz and only 100 from Earthquake. So Earthquake only gave you 10% more damage, since Flare Blitz is 120 base power plus stab minus the divided by the resistance isn't even that much less damage. I didn't understand that play, so this is why it's so hard for many of the analysts to kind of understand a lot of his prep and play, because one, he doesn't explain it, and two, even when he does misplay in post-com, I feel like you should be able to explain it, and I really couldn't understand it. Even if you didn't expect Mega Scizor to come in, it seemed like a pretty safe play all around, so that was just something that confused me. In terms of Geo, he played that game fantastically, brought the exact right mons, made the exact right plays, and gotta give props to him. He did play a fantastic game regardless of who he was up against. Going into the next match, we have the Kansas City Girachiefs up against the Melbourne Rotoms Jolt, bringing the Breloom Mega Venusaur core. Those two grass types, you can tell he loves to bring. The Gardevoir, Hydreigon, Seismitoad, Celesteela are also accompanying him. Cybertron bringing Pelipper, Mimikyu, Ludicolo, Kartana, Kingdra, and Heliolisk. I believe this is the first time he brings Heliolisk. I could be wrong. And yeah, this is...
He brought it week 1.
He brought it week 1. Okay, yeah. But as you can tell, though, he has not brought the electric types very often. 4 weeks later, he's brought it again. So, interesting to see how he's going to use it this time around. So, let's get into the match. Turn 1, we've got that Breloom up against that Pelipper. All around, Breloom just had an outstanding matchup. The set he brought was just worked out perfectly. I believe it was Scarfed, and all he had to do was bring it in, click Bullet Seed, and really pick up a kill unless the Kartana came in. And unless he knew it was Scarfed, there was no way Cybertron was ever going to bring in Kartana. So he launched off a pretty safe Bullet Seed as the Pelipper came in, thinking it would be pretty safe, though you can see that Bullet Seed absolutely destroyed that Pelipper with 5 hits. Didn't actually matter, even if he did 2 hits, I guess 2 hits and another 2 hits would have been like bad, but even if he got maybe 3 hits and then 2 hits, it would have worked out. I don't think he would have switched into the Kartana. Scarf was not revealed, so all around it worked out. He got rid of it in one shot, and losing the Rainmon, Cybertron knows is a problem, recognize that's a problem, but it worked out great for him. Ludicolo getting that Scald Burn on the Celesteela, doing some neat damage, really caught off Jolt and forced him on the backhand to bring in that Hydreigon and take a critical hit Ice Beam. Now that was big in his commentary because he couldn't safely switch in that Pokemon on the Mimikyu. Mimikyu being able to weaken down the Mega Venusaur and eventually get it down with Destiny Bond, great prep and play on Cybertron's end. Being able to get rid of Mega Venusaur, one of the biggest, fattest stops to any Raincore. I mean, that was overall great prep, and I love to see the way he brought that thing down. Gardevoir, though, again, the matchup on Jolt's team is honestly what I think brought him back. The Scarf Gardevoir was ridiculous in this matchup, especially thanks to Trace. We've seen it before with Alolan Raichu and the Surge Surfer. We've seen it with the Sand Rush. The way he plays with this thing is awesome to see because the Trace works out perfectly. Gardevoir does have to be sacked, though, because the Kartana had no switch-ins, which was incredible because the Mega Venusaur just went down. So he's forced to click Moonblast, not enough damage to which Kartana is able to safely set up that substitute and get a huge kill off. Although it is so weakened that now Cybertron really doesn't have a Bullet Seed switch in, and from there it's really just going to be Breloom clicking Bullet Seed on whatever comes in. First is the Ludicolo, then we have the Kingdra versus the Seismitoad, Kingdra doubling out into the Heliolisk, Seismitoad into Celesteela, and now again Cybertron making an outstanding play to which Jolt has to sack his Celesteela, and that's why you see such a low differential. I really think that Jolt's matchup is what allowed him to win, and Cybertron's plays was what allowed him to bring it down so close. Later on, though, that Life Orb damage on the Kingdra, plus the Draco Meteor from that Hydreigon, is going to allow Breloom to come in, click Mach Punch. Wow, words are hard today. Click Mach Punch and end that game. So again, another really quick match, but a great match to witness, especially if you were looking at the plays Cybertron was making. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have criticized Cybertron kind of earlier on in the season for, you know, obviously making some novice plays and some, like, I guess uninformed plays of not knowing certain sets. But this game, despite having what on paper looks like a pretty bad matchup and obviously going against a very tough Draft League competitor in Jolt, he played very well. Jolt put himself in a position to win with that Breloom, but despite that, like, he still managed to make it a 1-0, which is very impressive. That battle had maybe the Breloom been more offensive, it could have gone more into Jolt's favor, but I feel like a lot of the plays that Cybertron was making prevented that Breloom from totally decimating him. Obviously, it was unavoidable in the end, but, you know, I think he did pretty good job. You know, maybe like some grass resist berries or something, but obviously with that Bullet Seed, it's hard to deal with that.
I mean, nothing really resists grass, right? Even though like Ludicolo and Kingdra and Pelipper, all those water mons didn't even resist, so grass berry wouldn't even have helped.
So moving on to our next matchup, a bit of a controversial one. We have the Florida Gators versus the Montreal Habsols. The Gators have the roster of Mega Altaria, Mamoswine, Crobat, Heatran, Klefki, and Superior, while the Montreal Habsols have the Barbaracle, Zapdos, Scolipede, a normal set, Mudsdale, and Megalopony. I actually did really like the Scolipede set this week because Gator really does not have a switch into the Scolipede. If it's able to get like a speed boost up and he's forced to switch out into something, it can be very threatening. So I thought that was a pretty good bring, just looking at the team preview. But getting into the battle, we have starting off the Klefki versus the Zapdos. Klefki right away is going to get the Toxic off on the Zapdos, while the Zapdos is going to go for the Thunderbolt and get the Paralysis on the Klefki right away. Now this is unfortunate for the Klefki because Gator was planning on having the Klefki as one of his main Lopunny switch-ins, and also, you know, potentially switch into Scolipede, because the only thing it doesn't really want to take from Scolipede is like an Earthquake. And the Klefki was also carrying the priority Reflect, so it's able to switch in on a lot of these mons, set up a Reflect, and then either switch out into something else or sit there and potentially wall it for a little bit with Toxic. Here we're going to see the Klefki swap into the Heatran while the Zapdos U-turns to the Mudsdale. Then the Heatran is going to swap for the Superior as the Mudsdale gets its Stealth Rocks up. So we're going to kind of see this pattern for a while. The Superior is going to come in on the Mudsdale, and the Mudsdale is either going to get up Stealth Rocks or maybe go for a Heavy Slam or something. And then this will lure in the Zapdos, which will U-turn as the Superior tries to set up a sub, which we do see here. The Zapdos comes out, the Superior sets up a Substitute. The Superior is going to knock off the Zapdos leftovers here as the Zapdos is going to U-turn into Scolipede. Now, before we get into the next play, looking back on this previous play, so now the Zapdos has its leftovers knocked off and its Toxic. This is pretty bad for the Zapdos as it is able to soak up a couple hits, but having that Toxic damage over time and then also not having its leftovers is going to be very detrimental for it. But now we have the Scolipede in against the Superior. The Superior does not have a Substitute, and it is going to want to switch out here. Now, Aster makes a fantastic play here. He predicts that the Crobat might want to come in to try to defog, so he goes for the Rock Slide, and then he's able to get enough damage off on the Crobat so then he can swap into his Mudsdale as the Crobat goes for a Brave Bird, dying to the Recoil. Here we're going to see the Superior come out, and the Mudsdale is going to swap for the Scolipede. The Superior Leaf Storms, and Gator has the Hidden Power Rock. I believe Aster had the Akka Berry to take a potential Hidden Power Fire, predicting a Metagross, or he was EV to take an HP Fire. But either way, I'm pretty sure it was the Berry. I might be totally wrong on that. But the Superior is going to go for the Hidden Power Rock. He had Hidden Power Rock to hit both the Zapdos and the Scolipede. He does get a crit with the Hidden Power Rock, and I believe it was a damage roll, again, depending on spread. I don't think Aster had a Team Builder this week, so I didn't get the chance to see the exact Scolipede set. But the Scolipede is going to go down here. This is very unfortunate because, obviously, as I mentioned at the team preview, the Scolipede can put in a ton of work, and with it down, it's going to be very bad. The Superior is able to set up a Substitute, as we are going to see that Zapdos come in and U-turn to break the sub, which brings in the Lopunny. Gator is going to go into his switch for that being the Klefki as the Lopunny just returns. The Lopunny is going to swap out to the Mudsdale, and the Klefki gets full parried here. I believe he went for either a Reflect or a Toxic. He is able to get up a Reflect on the following turn as the Mudsdale is going to go for a Heavy Slam, and with the Reflect up, Gator can kind of safely go into a Superior, but Aster has a very good bring of the Roar on the Mudsdale, so he's going to roar the Superior out back into the Klefki, and Klefki is going to use this opportunity to Toxic the Mudsdale. Now, again, this Toxic is going to be very important later on. Just like the Zapdos, this Mudsdale does not want to be worn down. So now the Klefki is going to swap back into Superior as Mudsdale Heavy Slams again. And then we're going to see the Mamoswine come out because the Mudsdale does not want to stay in on the Superior. And so I guess Gator predicts that the Zapdos would probably want to come out. So Gator's going to go into his Mamoswine as the Zapdos does come out, which is fine for Aster because he's able to go into his Milotic, which once it gets his Flame Orb up, it can effectively wall Mamoswine very well. But the Mamoswine's just going to use that opportunity to get up its rocks and then swap out into the Klefki as the Milotic goes for a Scald, knocking out the Klefki. The Superior comes in to Leaf Storm as the Milotic is able to take one hit and then fire off an Ice Beam, killing the Superior. But the Milotic is going to be low enough and not fast enough because the Mamoswine is going to come out and Earthquake the Milotic, taking that down. Then we see the Lopunny come in, going for a low kick, knocking out the Mamoswine, and then again low kicking the Heatran to knock that out. Now some people may be wondering, well, why would Gator send in the Heatran right away just to get knocked out by the Lopunny? His game plan here is he's going to go into his Altaria, which has the Dragon Dance and the Cotton Guard. Now, assuming the Lopunny doesn't have Encore or anything like that, then the Mega Lopunny can win the game, and the reason he sacked off the Heatran was so that he couldn't get roared out from the Mudsdale, because if the Altaria is the only Mon remaining on his team, then he can go out to that setup, and there's no way that he can get phased out, and he's able to take hits from the Lopunny. So again, as long as it does not have that Encore in his mind, he should be good to go. Now, on Aster's side of the field, he's thinking, okay, well, I can just roar out this Altaria if it tries to set up, and he's also running double status on his Lopunny. He has the Thunder Wave if he predicts that it's going to be a Dragon Dance set, and then he has the Toxic if he predicts that it's going to be a Cotton Guard set. So he does predict correctly that it will be a Cotton Guard set. It's actually both Dragon Dance and Cotton Guard. He goes for the Toxic and misses. This allows Altaria to set up a Dragon Dance and then knock out the Mega Lopunny. And from this point on, the Altaria is just going to be able to sit on the field and continue to use Roost and Cotton Guard to be able to 1v1 the Mudsdale, because as I mentioned previously, the Mudsdale was toxic. So eventually, once Mudsdale is in range to die from Altaria's frustration, then Altaria will be able to get up yet another Dragon Dance as the Barbarical comes out, surviving a hit from that, taking out the Barbarical and then the Zapdos on the following turn. So Toxic Miss was huge because the Mudsdale would be able to sit there in front of the Altaria, and eventually the Altaria would go down. It would not have enough HP to be able to take out the rest of Aster's team. So yeah, that definitely sucked, but hacks is part of the game, so...
Yeah, you know 100% right, and unfortunately it didn't work out in the end for Aster. That, along with mispredicting the hidden power Superior was going to carrying HP Rock instead of the predicted HP Fire. He had an Aqua Berry on that Scolipede. And then that, along with the fact that Superior just overall gave him a lot of trouble, along with the Mega Altaria in the end not being able to roll out, missing a Toxic, and then just being able to set up pretty freely. Overall, Aster, I think, played well. It came down to hacks and just some mispredictions when it came to prep. And overall, Gator did play that end game very well. Going into the next game, we have the San Jose oh my god, I swear words. San Jose Sharpedos and the Tampa Bay Luxrays. Tom bringing Landorus T, Komodo, Scissor, Roserade, Diancie, and Mega Houndoom. Mono bringing Keldeo, Weavile, Snorlax, Gliscor, Dragalge, and Registeel. Now, before I actually watched any of these team builders, the games, when I was doing Pick'em Crew, just looking at Komodo, I was so concerned for Mono, just the way it looked. And then with the team he brought, bringing Registeel, Snorlax, and Weavile. And then the combination of Dragalge, Keldeo being pretty easily Drain Punched, and Gliscor as long as he carried Ice Punch. I mean, he just had to set up Komodo and win, and that's exactly what he did. A clean 5-0, Komodo still grabbing 6 kills. I'll take you through the really early beginning. Roserade setting up the game with 3 sets of spikes. Registeel only getting up those rocks. Dragalge is going to kill a family of Roserades with its Draco. And then Landorus does U-turn on the Gliscor to bring in that Komodo. 1 Dragon Dance is all it needs to Ice Punch it, Drain Punch the entirety of Mono's team, and Dragon Claw the Dragalge. Just a clean sweep. It's pretty quick. A few things I could mention is the fact that he taunted with Gliscor to make sure Komodo didn't set up any more Dragon Dances. Toxic, obviously the better play, because perhaps he could have stalled out, made a few switches, and let the Komodo die. He was obviously afraid of Lum. I would have been too, but overall it didn't work out in his favor because he Toxics later on and sees that it's not even Lum. Counter could have been nice on a Registeel if he had a Chople Berry. Didn't. Overall, just Mono did not prep enough for Komodo, and if they fight again, I'm pretty sure he's not going to let that happen ever again. Tom played the game well, but overall, it just came down to Komodo having an amazing matchup. Do you have anything to say about this match?
I have 2 big things I want to say. So the first thing is there's a bit of karma here with Tom getting a sweep, because I believe Mono has swept Tom, I believe, twice in the past. The big one I remember is that Calm Mind Jirachi just kind of sitting there and just winning the game for what felt like an endless amount of turns. But it was definitely interesting to see Tom pull off a win like this versus an opponent like Mono. And then the second thing is, because this is a division match, it's going to shake up the division a lot, because we saw Mono at the top, and now we have, Tom beating him with a 5-0, which is really going to shake things up. So definitely was a cool game to see happen. Obviously unfortunate for Mono, but Tom, it's looking like it could be a good season for him. It may be crunch time. It may finally be crunch time. But let's move on to our next battle. We have the Victorian Shadows versus the New Orleans. Pelipers. The Pelipers have a roster of Garchomp, Tentacruel, Escavalier, Piloswine, Tornadus T, and Hariyama, while the Victorian Shadows have the roster of Dhelmise, Mega Alakazam, Diggersby, Togekiss, Araquanid, and Tyranitar. Starting off the battle, we see the Tentacruel setting up the Toxic Spikes very early on, also showing that the Tentacruel will be a great switch into Necrostevo's Togekiss, but with these Toxic Spikes up as early as they are, Necro is going to be taking a lot of residual damage on everything on his team except for that Togekiss, and we are going to see the Alakazam come out on the Tentacruel, but Pokemon has a great way of dealing with this, being his Escavalier. The Alakazam does set up a Calm Mind, but the incoming Focus Blast is not going to do nearly enough damage to really do anything to that Escavalier. The HP Fire could have been cool, but it didn't come out, we didn't see it. So the Alakazam will fall to the combo of a Pursuit and the poison damage set earlier from the Toxic Spikes. Necro then sends out his Diggersby to U-turn to the Dhelmise. Unfortunately for John, he does miss the Mega Horn on the incoming Dhelmise, and the Dhelmise is going to follow up with a Shadow Claw crit. I believe you mentioned that it mattered in that moment, but it didn't really matter in the overall battle. So the Escavalier is going to go down to that. This is followed up by the Tornadus coming in to knock off the Dhelmise, but the Dhelmise is carrying that Cobra Berry, which will allow it to not take a lot of damage and get huge damage off versus the Tornadus with a Rock Slide. This does pretty much force the Tornadus to switch out, bringing in the Hariyama, which is going to take a huge hit from the Dhelmise, but it will be able to retaliate with an Ice Punch, bringing down that Dhelmise. Then this gives a bit of a shift of momentum towards Necro. He's going to bring in that Diggersby to revenge kill the Hariyama at the cost of taking a Bullet Punch and some poison damage. Pokemon has a great response to that Diggersby though, being his Piloswine. Necro then sends in the Araquanid. It does unfortunately die to a crit Stone Edge. It's hard to say whether or not that crit mattered, as I believe the Piloswine could have followed up with another Stone Edge, which would have knocked it out, but there's obviously the chance of the Stone Edge missing, or maybe Necro deciding that he was going to switch or something. But regardless, this is going to put the momentum back into the hands of Pokemon, as we see the Togekiss come out, getting stopped by the Tentacruel once again. Then Necro tries to set up with his Tyranitar with the Dragon Dance, but the Tentacruel is able to do quite a lot of damage to that alongside of the poison from earlier, putting in rage for the Tornadus to come out, avoiding an Earthquake, and then knocking out the Tyranitar with a U-turn. And that's pretty much game at this point, as Pokemon is able to clean up the rest of the match with the Tentacruel and the Piloswine, giving the New Orleans Pelipers a solid 4-0 victory over the Victorian Shadows.
Yeah, I have to say, the way this game played out, I mean, I think just the fact that, again, like you said before, this is another divisional matchup within the same division as Mono and Tom. So it played out in the favor of John, and we're going to see that affect the conference breakdown. So let's jump into it, yeah?
Conference breakdown. I have quite a lot to say about it this week. So looking at Ula Ula, we don't see too much of a change other than Geo pulling a little bit further ahead of the Detroit Steel Wings and the Columbus Chew. But however, despite pulling a bit ahead, he is still behind his conference opponents in the Pony Division. We did see a slight change of the Bronx Bearticks moving ahead of the Melbourne Rotoms, which does currently have them in playoff range alongside of MV, Lars, and Jolt from that conference. Then looking at the Moon Conference, we see Melee Melee is a very similar story to Ula Ula, where none of the teams are currently in playoff range outside of the Philadelphia Scissors, obviously, who are currently the rest of the Melee members are behind the Akala members. And speaking of the Akala division, we've seen a big shift up here. All three of the top teams in Akala are 3-2, with Tom now leading, Pokemon in the middle, and then Mono trailing very close behind. So this does have those three teams in current playoff race alongside Chimpact for that conference. That all being said, we are nearing the halfway mark of the season, so from here on out, the games are going to start to matter a lot more. The Gators and Bewares are going to be fighting with those Akala members for the wild card spots for the Moon Conference, while we have Geo, Joey, Lars, and Aaron competing for the wildcard spots in the Sun Conference. Then we have the Habsel, Steelwings, and Shadows, which they still have a pretty decent shot of potentially making a wildcard if they start getting some wins under their belts, but based on differential alone, they're going to need to do some catching up, and Coach Z especially is going to have to do a lot of catching up at this point if he wants to potentially make a wildcard.
Yes, exactly that, especially with the way things are shaping up, as next week is week 6. As you all know, there are 12 weeks in the GBA, and week 6 is that midway point, so we are very near that, and the way things are looking, certain teams are going to have to change things up a lot if they want a chance. Like you said, the Chew, Steel Wings, Shadows, Hapsolds, if any of those four want a really good shot, they really have to up their game. Everyone else has a fair chance, especially when you look at the Pony division. I mean, most of them have a pretty great record. The fact that Bronx Bearticks sitting at a positive win-loss ratio, and although Melbourne Rotoms are not, they don't have negative differential. And then looking at Akala, the top 3 teams, all within 2 or 3 differential points, all with the same record. Akala is really going to be a toss-up. Even the Shadows can bring it back if they wanted to within the next 7 weeks. So very interesting to see. Very exciting to see that Scissors and Giraffe Chiefs, Chimp and Jolt, only ones left undefeated. Wondering if that'll change at any point. Which one will go down first, if any? Will it come down to a championship match? We don't know. So that's going to be really exciting to keep track of. Jumping into the league leaders, up first, a Pokemon you would not, I mean, you would expect the Pokemon, just the fact that the record doesn't show. Thunderous Incarnate and the Detroit Steel Wings sitting at number 1. Detroit Steel Wings and Chase are no new face to the number 1. They still hold the number 1 Mon from last season, being Cobalion, and even number 2 with Crocodile. So the fact that he's got number 1 Thunderous, in no way am I surprised. The only thing that really surprises me is the fact that he's really not doing too well with a 1-to-4 win-loss ratio, and still having Thunderous sit there up top. It's fascinating to me. I think it's really cool. Let alone the fact that Nihilego, Mega Pinsir are still sitting at number 2 and number 3, Chimpax and MV, showing why those monsters, a Mega and an Ultra Beast, deserve to be at the top. Looking at 4 through 10, we have Zygarde, Doggo, Breloom, Weavile, all with 8 kills. The Komodo picking up that 6-0 sweep is now at number 7. Haxorus racking up a lot of kills with Geo. Scizor, Tom is doing really well with that thing. And Xurkitree also picking up enough kills to sit up there at number 10. Overall, all these Pokemon seem really fitting. We got 3 dragons up here, which makes sense to me. Still only 1 Mega Pokemon, which baffles me, but 2 Ultra Beasts, which do make sense. What do you make of the league leaders?
Yeah, I mean, it is really starting to shape up at this point as what we'd see late game for league leaders. We're obviously going to see a couple things creep in, because like stuff at the bottom, like for example the Xurkitree, it hasn't gotten a lot of kills since week 1, and we're now at week 5, so there's definitely a lot of mons that have been catching up to it, and if it doesn't start getting more kills, we'll probably see that drop out in future weeks, unless of course it does get more kills, in which it may climb. But things like the Weavile have consistently been very good to the matches it's been brought. Obviously Komodo jumping up with a big sweep. Will we see it stay, or will it fall off as time goes on? Who really knows? The Haxorus as well has been, consistently getting some points on there. So yeah, I mean, pretty interesting to see. It's relatively stuff that's expected though, nothing too crazy. But yeah, I do want that Zygarde to stay up there.
Yes, yeah, it definitely helps out your... Well, I'm pretty sure that's it, right? Your bold prediction is pretty much settled at that, right?
Yeah,
that is
as long as it stays up there, I'm a happy dog.
Yeah, and the fact that that Jolt also now has a Pokemon, Breloom, obviously being his star as he picked that Pokemon. Did he pick it up? I think he picked up Breloom. Could be wrong. I think he did pick up Breloom with his first transaction. Regardless, though, seeing him finally do well, seeing as though he has, I'm pretty sure the best, I think he has a better differential than Chimpact. So the fact that he, at number...
1 point, yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that he finally has a Pokemon sitting there at number 5, I think is humbling in a sense. But very cool, very cool. So if you guys enjoyed week 5 of the weekly recap, let us know in the comment section. And next week, we will hit you up for the middle of the season, week 6. Going to be a great set of matches. So if you're looking forward to that, let us know, and we will see you guys next week. Peace.
See ya.